Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John's report is for the 31st, the end of the month, okay? And, well, nice reversal back up into the same ranges. It's interesting to see this. Well, of course, this chart's a little different than our previous ones because I had a massive crash after doing a couple of programming changes, and it just didn't quite work out well and got into one of those never-ending loops and wouldn't stop. But we had the complete resurgence off of the 61% coming down here. But you also notice that we're at a confluence point. We had the green ABM as well as all the other in-between ones. And, you know, it's interesting because you see this time and time again. We came right to the 50, we came back up, closed above the ABM green. Once above the ABM green, it's when I talk about one of those, you know, pivot opportunities. We see it all the time. Same situation where then you end up with the ABM gold, which is now almost at 76%, and long above, short below. It really becomes that straightforward and not hard to follow now. If I had the alternative peak bar on here, these would all be gold candles, signifying the fact that we've had the gold rising of the shakeout. What that gives you is just that we're in a reasonably lengthy trend from way back in April of this initial rise. Now, is this spectacular with the weak shakeout? No, but the fact that price responded as strong as it did was probably mostly just not any real short activity that they had covered on the original dip. And it was perfect kind of setup. I mean, imagine let's see if we go ahead and run a little Fibonacci just from this to the peaks. There was the 50%, which pretty close. Close enough when you're not really looking at that. I mean, it really matched more to the Morganachis as well as to the ABM than it did to you know, the way people traditionally would run their Fibonacci's, which is exactly why we don't do it that way. I think that answers that one pretty effectively. And the NASDAQ we knew was already going to be the catalyst, and you can see the difference. It was already above the ABM yellow and had not closed below it, so it wasn't even in violation of that configuration. And the shakeout for it was already still positive. It's now moved to negative starting into the day. And a lot of this was the catalyst change of the euro, because as soon as the euro starts to spike back up, all of the value of the S&P companies rises with it. Now, is this a significant change? It just bounced off of, well, you might want to call it a dead cat bounce, but it had been improving from the second half, and you can see it in the extreme histogram. Deep red, and then we start making lower lows on the higher extremes. We still didn't have a buy, but we've been slowly improving. And finally now, you have the first significant cross with the potential of breaking the 23%. Hasn't done it yet. I mean, we crossed it here before and got overbought. Same thing could happen right in this range too. And it's not even really correct to say overbought, and merely just that the algo activity that was beginning to set up for it just could not sustain itself and imploded under its own weight. But this is a pretty significant bounce back, and it's all about the Euro Italian crisis being averted potentially, because the global EU bloc is going to remove the Italian finance minister who isn't pro-euro, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really make any difference. The euro was due for a correction, and now it's in place. Still crazy from a TLT. This indication that the broad belief is that the U.S. economy has stalled. So there you have it. That's what the treasury buying is all about in that particular case. Very bizarre. And oil spiking back up. It had just filled in. A lot of this, you know, they got to make up a reason for why these things do a lot of these things. Some of it is literally just they were done making the move and pulled their money, and that's the way it goes. Gold still sustaining a nice base here. You can see the improvement, no question about it. It's just with no catalyst of inflation or worry of it that it's really not going to break out just yet, but when it does, it will be dramatic. Well, so this is the day from Friday from a 5K chart. All right, so we ended with the a lot of little dots. Little dots just represent the extreme histograms, pointing out when it gets a bit overdone. A lot of these all got filled back in, at least the red ones did, with the yellow. Because the yellow, you don't have the retrace likelihood that you do with the red. So you would end up with a red, then you would end up with a yellow that filled it, another yellow, then you get a little red that gets filled in, and so on and so forth. And that just continued all the way through. And once you get above the 76% line, this is where it becomes really kind of interesting with that. And that ABM green, if you could follow it in between the long and short algo, because that's really what happens is the long and short algo sort of just mirror this all the way up here from the 61, 76%. No real violations of it. I mean, it's kind of one of those, if you're long, it's sort of boring and doesn't do a whole lot. If you're trying to short it, it's a testament in fortitude, because you get some decent short signals and they don't do a whole lot. Like at the end of the day here, this is an okay DOC spread developing right here at the peak. It actually makes a move, but the problem is you ended up with this narrowing range and the rising 50%. So it did make it to the 50%. So it did what it was supposed to do. You just didn't get the payoff that you look for where you want, you know. And that's because with the rising highs, you don't get that plateau effect like here. Because the plateau of this effect with the rising lows suggests that you're going to want to return to the lows. And interestingly enough, we opened the after hours all the way down to the 23%. Where did that dip? Cleared that small interruption for telephone. But we're seeing here already some pretty strong action in the pre-market. That's a lot of bars for where we are at this particular time. And that's okay, because again, we had very little dips in the shakeout, and that's an interesting one too, because if you shrink this up like really small, you see that wave of deep red shakeouts with declines, and then as soon as it goes green, following it all the way along there, stayed pretty well. And look, you'll notice we do get almost the inverse effect that you have from the short with the steel above, the steel below, until it finally, it broke above a few times, but it's a little bit different. You can't utilize it from the same way that it works to the short side, but it's close. What happens is the trigger usually would have to be, ending of the long would be the steel moving above the 7.5. That usually signifies the end of it. It's not just about DOC spread, because like we said, you know, even though this is a decent DOC spread at the end of the day, the rising Morganacci lines, it doesn't produce a whole lot, and you can see the ripple effect. That's just a constant new highs being made all the way throughout that entire run. Brought it all the way back to exactly, and this is that old 2727 was the short confluence from back over here. So through all the disrupt, we're exactly where we were before. So hello, mean reversion market. I will be sending out in the new Morganacci, you'll have an input that will allow you to put a 1 or a 0 if you want to see the range lines. So you'll have that option in there as well. I'm going to put together a little tightening of some conditions for the dots, not just every single situation, but that also correspond with a few other details, and put that together as well, so that you'll have that, which is all good stuff. And then so close on the finalization of the paint bar adjustments, and that'll be nice to get out. We had a little Motorino accident yesterday, which kind of threw my scheduling off a little bit, but we'll still get everything to everyone, and should be able to start a nice June. After all, is selling May and going way, it's not really going to work here, because if they were selling into that massive rise, then they're already looking bad for the start of their summer break, which is, I think, a joke, but it's nice to say it anyway. As always, though, trade well, and I will put up charts of the Skype chat and go through any special situations if they arise. Until later.